The sun rose fiercely over the kingdom of Amanera, casting long shadows across the red earth as villagers gathered along the royal road. Word had spread for days. The queen was coming. When royalty moved, ordinary life stopped. Drums thundered. Horns cried out. Dust rose as horses stamped the ground. Among the crowd stood Temo, a 10-year-old boy with feet hardened by barefoot walks and ears that had always drawn attention before his words ever could. His mother held his wrist tightly. "Do not stare," she whispered. "And do not speak unless spoken to." Temo nodded. He had learned early that silence was safer. The royal convoy slowed. The queen's carriage gleamed in gold and deep indigo cloth. When she stepped down, the land seemed to bow. Elders prostrated themselves. Voices lowered. Her eyes moved slowly across the villagers, measuring, judging. Then she saw him. She paused. "Bring that boy forward," she said. The guards parted the crowd. Temo felt his heart pound as he stood before the throne. The queen leaned slightly, studying him as one would examine a strange object. She smiled. "With ears like these," she said loudly, "this child must hear secrets even the wind has not spoken." Laughter followed. Not cruel at first, then louder. Some villagers joined, afraid not to. Temo felt something tighten in his chest. His ears burned, but his face remained still. The queen waved her hand dismissively and turned away. The moment ended as quickly as it began. But for Temo, nothing ended. That night, while the village slept, he sat outside his family's hut. The air was alive with sound, the rustle of grass, distant footsteps, whispers carried by wind. He listened. And for the first time, he understood something profound. The queen had power. But power did not listen. And that realization planted a seed deeper than shame. From that day onward, something changed in Temo, not outwardly, but within. He spoke less. Observed more. While other boys chased goats and tested their strength, Temo lingered near places where stories gathered. The marketplace. The wells. The shade where elders argued softly about seasons gone wrong. "Why does the ground crack before the rains?" he once asked an old farmer. "Because the earth is tired," the man replied. Temo remembered that. At the riverbank, fishermen complained about shrinking catches. "The water is changing," one said. "But no one listens." Temo listened. He noticed patterns, how prices rose before scarcity, how anger brewed long before voices rose, how disaster always announced itself quietly first. "You hear too much," his uncle warned one evening. "A boy should speak, not listen like an old man." Temo replied. "Old men speak because they did not listen when they were boys." By 15, villagers began to notice. When Temo warned of failed rains, crops were saved. When he advised traders to delay travel, danger passed them by. "How do you know?" they asked. He shrugged. "The world talks." At 18, Temo left Amanera with nothing but sandals, memory, and awareness. He walked trade routes, crossed borders, learned tongues. He slept beside caravans and ports, absorbing the sound of ambition and fear alike. Where others argued, he listened. Where others rushed, he waited. The laughter of the queen never left him, but it no longer wounded. It sharpened him. Years moved across Temo like the slow passage of seasons, unannounced, inevitable, shaping him without spectacle. By his 30th year, he had crossed more borders than he could count. Some were marked by stones and guards, others only by language and custom. In each place he listened before he spoke, learned before he acted. In the northern trade towns, merchants argued loudly, each convinced his voice carried truth. Temo sat in the shade, silent, noting the pauses between words. He learned that hesitation often revealed more than confidence. "You speak little," a wealthy trader named Bako once observed, studying him over a cup of spiced tea. "I listen much," Temo replied. Bako laughed. "That will not make you rich." Temo smiled gently. "It already has." He learned when to store grain and when to release it. He advised caravan leaders on routes not by maps, but by tension in voices and rumors that repeated themselves too often to be false. When conflicts brewed, Temo heard them before drums ever sounded. By 40, his name was spoken quietly in markets far from Amanera. Ask the listener, people said. He hears the future. Yet Temo avoided titles. He knew how easily words could imprison a man. He chose freedom instead, freedom to move, to listen, to refuse noise. His ears, once mocked, now anchored him. They reminded him that wisdom was gathered, not declared. Then news reached him from the south. Amanera was struggling. Trade routes were failing. Farmers protested poor harvests. Youths spoke openly of rebellion. The Queen's court argued endlessly, drowning truth in volume. Temo closed his eyes and listened, not to messengers, but to patterns he knew well. This was not collapse yet. But it was approaching. When the royal summons arrived, sealed in gold, he did not hesitate. The boy who had once been laughed at was being called, not as a curiosity, but as a necessity. The palace of Amanera had not changed. Its stone walls still rose proudly against the sky, carved with stories of conquest and glory. Guards still stood rigid, spears gleaming in the sun. The scent of incense and authority lingered in the air. But Temo had changed. At 45, he walked with calm assurance, not arrogance. His clothing was simple but refined. His ears were still large, unhidden, unashamed. When Queen Nyarka entered the hall, her presence commanded silence. She had aged, but power still rested easily on her shoulders. Her eyes fell on Temo, and narrowed. The memory returned to her before the name did. You, she said slowly, rising from her throne. The boy from Lumo. Temo bowed deeply. Yes, your majesty. The court stirred. Advisors exchanged glances. You remember that day? She continued, her voice unreadable. I remember listening, Temo said calmly. A murmur passed through the hall. The queen descended a step. They say you hear things before they arrive. I hear what people ignore. She studied him for a long moment. Then she dismissed her counsel with a sharp gesture. When the doors closed, the hall felt heavier. What do you hear now? She asked quietly. Temo did not rush to answer. He closed his eyes. He listened, not to the palace, but to the kingdom beyond it. I hear farmers tired of shouting, he said. I hear traders suffocating under broken systems. I hear anger growing, not because people lack hope, but because no one listens. The queen exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, she did not interrupt. She listened. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted, not through force, but through humility. The silence that followed Temo's words did not feel empty. It felt heavy, like the air before rain. Queen Nyarka turned away from him and walked slowly back toward her throne. Each step echoed through the hall, louder than the voices of the advisors she had dismissed moments earlier. She sat, rested her hands on the armrests, and stared ahead, not at Temo, but at something far deeper. You speak as though you stand outside my kingdom, she said at last. Temo remained still. I stand within it, your majesty. I simply listen from the ground instead of the throne. The queen's jaw tightened. In her youth, such words would have earned punishment. But something had changed, not in the kingdom alone, but in her. Every advisor who comes here speaks loudly, she said. They promise certainty. They demand urgency. Yet nothing improves. She looked directly at him now. You speak quietly. And still, your words disturb me. Temo nodded. Truth is often disturbing when it has been ignored too long. She rose again, pacing. What would you change? She asked. Temo did not answer immediately. He knew the danger of speaking too quickly in the presence of power. Instead, he asked, May I ask what you hear, your majesty? The queen stopped walking. I hear rebellion, she said sharply. I hear impatience. I hear disrespect. Temo shook his head gently. No. You hear symptoms. Not the cause. He stepped forward, not too close, but close enough to be heard clearly. The farmers feel unseen. The traders feel trapped. The youth feel irrelevant. They are not angry because they hate the crown. They are angry because they believe the crown no longer hears them. The queen returned to her seat slowly. For the first time in decades, she dismissed not her advisers, but her certainty. "Stay," she said quietly. "Listen with me." And so began something unheard of in Amanera, a ruler who paused. Change did not arrive with celebration. It arrived with discomfort. Queen Nyarka ordered listening councils, not gatherings where people spoke to impress, but sessions where officials were forbidden to interrupt. Farmers were invited into halls they had never entered. Traders spoke without fear of punishment. Youth representatives were allowed to question policy openly. At first, the court resisted. "This is weakness," one advisor whispered. "This is dangerous," another warned. Temo stood beside the queen, not as a commander, but as a presence. He reminded her quietly when voices rose too quickly. He advised patience when pressure demanded speed. "The kingdom did not break overnight," he said. "It will not heal overnight." Trade systems were examined slowly. Routes were reopened where fear had closed them. Taxes were restructured, not removed, but made fair. Most importantly, feedback was no longer treated as rebellion. Outside the palace, people noticed. "They are listening," farmers said cautiously. "Let us see if it lasts," traders replied. The queen herself changed. She spoke less in council. Asked more questions. Took longer before decisions. She began to understand something Temo had learned as a boy, that authority did not weaken when it listened, it sharpened. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the palace walls, the queen turned to Temo. "Why did you come back?" she asked. "After what I did?" Temo considered the question. "Because bitterness builds nothing," he said. "And because if I truly listened, I could not ignore my own people." She nodded slowly. In that moment, Queen Nyarka understood the cost of mockery, and the value of humility. And Amanera, though still fragile, had begun to breathe again. As Amanera slowly regained its balance, the court began to change its tone. Where once titles were weapons and influence was hoarded, a quieter respect took root. The queen's advisers, though uneasy, could not deny results. Markets stabilized. Protests softened into dialogue. The kingdom, though not perfect, was no longer teetering on collapse. Whispers followed Temo wherever he went. "He should be rewarded," some said. "He deserves land," others insisted. "A title," urged the court. "Make him official." Queen Nyarka summoned him one evening as dusk settled over the palace, painting the sky in deep reds and golds. "You have served this kingdom well," she said. "More than many born into power." She gestured to a scroll. "I offer you governorship over 3 trade regions. Wealth. Authority. Protection." Temo looked at the scroll but did not touch it. "Your Majesty," he said gently, "if I accept this, I will stop hearing the ground." The queen studied him. "Explain." "Power makes ears heavy," Temo replied. "Once weighed down by position, a man listens to protect himself, not the truth." She leaned back, surprised by the honesty. "I do not refuse out of pride," he continued. "I refuse because my usefulness lies in remaining unclaimed." The queen exhaled slowly. "You were mocked once," she said. "Many would use this moment for revenge." Temo shook his head. "Revenge builds nothing lasting. Purpose does." After a long silence, the queen nodded. "Then stay," she said. "Not above us. Not beneath us. But beside us." And for the first time, Temo accepted a role, not of power, but of purpose. Years passed. Amanera became known not as the loudest kingdom, but the wisest. Disputes were addressed before they hardened. Policies were shaped by those they affected. Leaders were trained not only to command, but to listen. Children in schools learned a new proverb carved into wooden boards. "The world speaks before it breaks." Temo aged gracefully, his hair touched with gray, his posture unchanged. He walked markets as he always had, listening more than speaking. When asked about the queen's mockery, he never spoke bitterly. "She taught me early," he would say. Without knowing. Queen Nyaraka, now older and quieter, often reflected on that day in Lumo. In private moments, she admitted to herself that laughter had nearly cost her everything. One afternoon, she addressed the court openly. "I once mistook difference for weakness," she said. "That mistake nearly destroyed this kingdom." She turned toward Temo. "What we mock without understanding may one day become our only salvation." When Temo finally withdrew from public life, he left no monument, no statue, no decree in his name. But the kingdom remained standing. And that was enough. The world often mocks what it does not understand. But wisdom grows in quiet places. Power that refuses to listen will always fall, and humility is the foundation of lasting leadership.